Hello, my name is Nina Schick and I am a broadcaster and author. My background is in geopolitics and information warfare. And I'm especially interested in how the kind of technological advances of our time are overhauling society and politics. I've just released a book called Deep Fakes, which is about the coming age of synthetic media and how the age of information is increasingly becoming one of disinformation and what we need to do about it. I'm going to talk today about synthetic media because I think it's one of the most exciting and revolutionary things in terms of the future of content production and media production. So I'll start, first of all, by defining what is synthetic media. Well, synthetic media is a type of fake or synthetic media that is either partially or wholly generated by AI. So in layman's terms, that's video, text, images, and voice that are created by artificial intelligence. And the ability of artificial intelligence or machines to create this type of synthetic media is only just emerging. We're only at the very beginning. It's been around for about 2 to 3 years. And it's thanks to the advances in so-called deep learning over the last decade. And as it turns out, the ability of machines to churn through all this data means that we can train them to create or generate their own output. And when it comes to media, that means we can literally train them to generate fake media. So voila, you have synthetic media. And to give you a concrete example of what that is, by training an AI machine on a data set of images of human faces, for example, it can learn what a human face looks like and then begin to generate it itself. This is one of the most revolutionary developments in the practical applications of AI, which is completely going to transform the future of content production, creativity, and creative industries forever. Well, why? Because what it's going to do is democratize visual content production by making it cheaper, faster, easier, and more high fidelity than anything we've ever seen before. Moreover, it's going to mean that anybody, even a YouTuber or somebody who doesn't have any resources, no special skills, can kind of create the same level of content that is only accessible to a Hollywood studio today. We can still, if you consider what we can do today, we can produce film, TV, and advertising, and it's much the same as it was, for the past 2 decades. We need actors, we need cameras, we need visual effects, we need post-production. And as you can imagine, this costs a lot of money and time and expertise. But now, thanks to AI, all of that is going to be stripped out of the process. Today, there is still a huge difference between what a Hollywood studio can create and what a YouTube creator can do. But synthetic media is going to change that equation forever. So this is going to be a huge boon for content creators. By the end of the decade, any YouTuber will be able to create the effects that are only accessible to Hollywood studios now. And to give you an example of just how powerful synthetic media is, I'd like to show you a clip. And it is to do with the film, The Irishman, which was obviously the latest project by the legendary producer, director Martin Scorsese. And as anyone who watched the film will know, Scorsese spent many, many years trying to figure out how to de-age his characters on film. He filmed with a special 3-ray camera. He spent lots of time in post-production. He had the best special effects artists working on his film for a period over 5 years. And if you watched The Irishman and you looked at how his main protagonist was de-aged, Robert De Niro, it looked quite good, but it wasn't quite right. Well, now, since Scorsese released his film in 2019, thanks to advances in synthetic media, one YouTuber has taken some free AI software and tried to use the AI to achieve the same effect that Scorsese spent so many years and so much money on. And we will see the clip now.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah, well, you know, this is all place. You helped me with my truck a couple of months ago.
As you could see with the split screen, the Netflix production arguably looks less good than what one YouTuber did for free using some free AI software. And this, again, is the only beginning of the synthetic media revolution. This is increasingly going to become better and better and better. And the quality of AI to generate humans is something that, until now, special effects have been unable to do. We're hardwired to spot when something feels slightly odd. It's called uncanny valley. And with Scorsese's films, we could tell that the human didn't look quite right. But increasingly with AI and synthetic media, we're going to be able to produce this high fidelity content where fake humans, which are generated by AI, are going to look indistinguishable from the real deal. And this is not only going to be in terms of video, but also in terms of voice generation. And we can see another really effective example of how powerful this is when we consider a recent ad, which was released by the Malaria Must Die campaign, in which AI was used to generate David Beckham speaking in nine languages. And we'll just have a look at that clip now. The new campaign is calling on all working people to take action to end malaria.
Malaria isn't just any disease. It's the deadliest disease there's ever been.
Se dice que ha matado más de la mitad de la población que ha existido.
وما زالت تقتل طفلا كل دقيقتين.
Mais nous pouvons y mettre fin. Nous savons comment, nous en avons la possibilité.
हमें और अधिक कार्रवाई की जरूरत है.
我们需要让世界领导人关注.
Hivyo tunazindua kampeni ya sauti.
Speak up and say, malaria must die. One voice can be powerful, but all of our voices together, then they will have to listen. Malaria must die, so millions can live.
I want to reiterate that that ad was completely synthetically generated, as well as the dubbing of David Beckham's voice. And this was something where there was no need for any cameras, no need for post-production, no need for special skills. So again, we're only at the very beginning of the synthetic media revolution. But as this technology becomes more accessible, which is going to happen over the coming months and years, some experts who I speak to believe that by the end of the decade, 90% of video content online is going to be synthetic. So you can imagine there are so many industries that are completely going to be overhauled by this revolution in content production. Just to give you some examples, consider fashion. In future, models won't be required to go to photo shoots anymore. Instead, they'll just digitally license their image, and content creators will then be able to use AI to generate those models in different poses, in different scenarios, wearing different clothes. Movies and video games, another example. They're going to change forever. The cost of producing high fidelity content in movies and films is going to get cheaper. They're going to become so good. Corporate communications is another example. Training videos increasingly are going to become synthetic. If you are the CEO of a global corporation and you need to communicate to your consumers or your employees in different markets across the world in different languages, AI will be able to do that for you with a few clicks of a button. Creative people are going to have so much scope to play with content production, and this is going to give us incredible examples in industry, for example, in advertising. And one of the first synthetic media ads, which was released earlier this year, and has been hailed as, you know, a great victory for how synthetic media will be used in advertising in the future, is an ad which was sponsored by State Farm, an American insurer, which was used to promote the Netflix documentary series, The Last Dance, on Michael Jordan. And we'll just have a look at that ad right now.
Let's get right to it. The Chicago Bulls have won their second three-peat. This is the kind of stuff that ESPN will eventually make a documentary about. They'll call it something like The Last Dance and make it a 10-part series and release it in the year 2020. It's going to be lit. You don't even know what that means yet. While I'm making predictions, jeans will get extra tight. There'll be a thing called a butt fumble, and this clip will be used to promote the documentary in a State Farm commercial. It's just a hunch.
So you can see why this ad got such accolades, because literally the people that created it used AI to take an existing old clip of an ESPN reporter and then manipulate what he was saying so that he actually predicted the documentary series and made a couple of other funny predictions for the future. So you can see how for content producers, synthetic media is going to change everything. But unfortunately, just as this is so revolutionary and so exciting and is going to transform entire industries and have multiple commercial and practical applications, just like with so many of the technologies of the exponential age, it is also going to have negative implications, because we are essentially creating the technology whereby anyone can create footage of anyone saying or doing anything. Now, within a controlled setting, that's great for creatives, but it's also the most sophisticated tool of mis and disinformation that has existed to date. And this is why I think it's very important as we enter the age of synthetic media that we have a clear taxonomy for the good and bad use cases of synthetic media. And that's why I refer to the negative use cases of synthetic media, especially when it's used for purposes of mis or disinformation, as deepfakes. And this is something that you've perhaps already heard, because deepfakes now have been around for 2.5 years, and there have been a lot of headlines with regards to deepfakes and how they can be used for political manipulation or to change the visual record. And this is something that I think needs to be distinguished from synthetic media and viable commercial applications. So the first use case of synthetic media, unfortunately, even though I've started with some exciting examples of how it can change advertising, corporate communication, and campaigns, the first use case of synthetic media is a bad one. It is the increasing prevalence of non-consensual pornography in the form of deepfakes, which is undeniably a gendered phenomenon against women. And like I mentioned, this ability of AI to be trained on someone's digital likeness, to be trained on someone's image, to spit out this fake content, is becoming so good and so accessible that it isn't only celebrities being targeted in these fake porn videos, it's increasingly also normal women. This is increasingly starting to leach out into other areas. So even though it starts with porn, the malicious use case of deepfakes, it's now also starting to leach into politics, where manipulated and synthetic media videos are being used to target politicians or people who are politically active and have voices that others want to suppress. And it's also now increasingly starting to be used as a weapon by criminals who wish to perpetrate fraud. This to me is alarming, because I think that in the age of information, increasingly our information ecosystem has become corrupt, to the extent where what we're facing really is the age of disinformation. And this has obvious consequences for politics. We're starting to see how polarized our politics has become. But it's not only that. Everything exists within this information ecosystem, your business, your life as a private citizen. So as we enter an age where seeing is no longer believing, it's not only that everything can be faked by a bad actor who wishes to use AI to create fake media of you, but everything can also be denied. And that's something called the liar's dividend. So what we are looking at really here is the corruption of our ecosystem, information ecosystem, to the extent where AI is going to make synthetic media ubiquitous, and the very notion of what is reality and what is truth is going to be further undermined. The entire concept of an objective reality is going to be undermined. Not only does that spell out chaos for politics, and especially Western liberal democracies, for which I think it is an existential threat, but it also implicates and it has huge implications for the rest of us as consumers and creators of media going forward. there is something that needs to be done here, because we are still at the very beginning of the age of synthetic media, and there is a big space for thought leadership on how this technology can be deployed ethically. And the first point, I think, as I already mentioned, comes with the defining of the taxonomy, the understanding that synthetic media can both be used for good and be used for bad. And then for the companies in the media space who are working with synthetic content to set the ethical boundaries for usage. And there is also a responsibility to do awareness to build awareness and build society-wide resilience in an age where seeing is no longer believing. Then we can start looking at the solutions that we need to apply across society to navigate this age of synthetic media. And broadly speaking, I think there are two categories of solutions. The first is a set of technical solutions, because as synthetic media and fake media, AI generated media becomes ubiquitous, which, as I already mentioned at the top of my talk, is only a matter of time. It's an inevitability. There is going to be no way that we are going to be able to detect what piece of media is authentic and what isn't, because the AI is going to become so good at generating it, it'll be impossible for us to tell what's real or fake. So we have to implement solutions that allow AI technical solutions to detect what media is fake. So we're going to have to look at detection solutions so that we can tell, when is a piece of media authentic or when is it faked. We're also going to have to put in solutions in our information ecosystem that have to do with the provenance of content. So if you're for example, a journalist, or you're a media organization which has a vested interest in displaying when a piece of media isn't synthetic, that it's actually legitimate and it's authentic, then we need to be able to show from the very inception of sharing that piece of content with a watermark, with some provenance technology, that this piece of media is not fake. However, those are the technical solutions for what is going to be a huge societal paradigm shift in terms of how we perceive the world. So there are also going to have to be human solutions. And by this, I mean policymakers are going to have to step up and decide when is a piece of content used maliciously, when is it not used maliciously, what responsibility do the social media platforms have, and we're going to have to update our policy and regulatory scope as well. But most importantly, and this is something that I really emphasize in my book, as we navigate the age of synthetic media, we're going to have to take a networked approach, because if we go to the extent where the very notion of reality is undermined and there is no trust in any media, well, that's a situation we don't want to be in. So we have to work together, and by this I mean industry leaders in the media, in media and content production, policymakers, as well as journalists, to be able to set up an information ecosystem that is increasingly safe and sound for consumers to navigate. And there is a huge space for industry to play a part in this. So just as the age of synthetic media is going to offer industry a tremendous opportunity to generate new content, to cheapen the whole process of making new content, especially video content, there is a deep moral and ethical imperative to get the framework for the use of synthetic media correct. Because if we don't get this right, and 5 or 6 years down the line, when synthetic media is ubiquitous and our politics has become even more partisan and polarized, it's going to be too late. So my message to everyone listening to this talk right now is the age of synthetic media is upon us. It's tremendously exciting. It has many, many new opportunities for investors, for content creators, for creatives, but it is also something that is going to be weaponized, and it is incumbent upon us to make sure, while we still have time, that these exciting developments in AI are not used to undermine our society and our politics.